So I built my career on the two things people just love to complain about: journalism and Gen Z. And I really felt the weight of this contradiction last year on election night 2024. So let's relive it, shall we? We're about to find out who the next president of the United States is. I'm in our college newsroom, executive producing live coverage for a university's television network. Around me, my team is doing everything by the book. We're verifying sources, we're fact-checking numbers, and then double fact-checking those numbers. We're crafting headlines and then immediately revising them because breaking news is coming in. We are chugging Celsius and running down the hallway screaming, "Look what the Times just broke!" I mean, we're doing everything that we were trained to do from our internships with major news networks. But then I glanced at my phone. And my classmates aren't waiting for our coverage. In fact, they're not even looking for it. And I was like, hello, if you're not here, then where could you possibly be? But I knew. Oh, of course I knew. Their TikTok feeds were blowing up with hot takes and viral memes and live reactions. A political commentator with no formal training is racking up millions of views breaking down key races. We literally have an interview with the United States Director of Cybersecurity, and a man with red LED lights in his bedroom background is talking about what freedom means to him. Comment sections are exploding with debate. The information is fast, it's emotional, and it's interactive. And that's when it hits me. These students trust these conversations more than they trust our newscast. And for that matter, all other newscasts simultaneously airing that night. And here's the thing. If we're not careful, we could see these data points and hear these stories and come to the conclusion that this generation just doesn't care about the truth. But is that right? Does Gen Z not value the truth? Are we lazy, naive, apathetic? These are the questions that haunt newsroom discussions, media conferences, and journalism schools across the country. They shape how networks approach younger audiences. They influence where resources flow and what strategies are implemented. And they're the wrong questions entirely. The truth isn't that my generation has abandoned the truth. No. What we're seeing here is a fundamental restructuring of how the truth is verified. And it shifted from institutional authority to community consensus. So it's not that Gen Z is rejecting the news. We're just reimagining how we engage with it. And this distinction is crucial because right now, journalism stands at a crossroads. We could either dismiss Gen Z for their lack of an attention spans and retreat back to our newsrooms, mourning the death of real journalism. Or we could adapt. And the stakes couldn't be higher, not just for the media institutions that are struggling to survive, but for democracy itself. Because a society where verified information can't compete with emotional appeal is a society that's vulnerable to manipulation and division. So today, I'm going to show you guys why these networks are struggling to interact with younger audiences, how we got here, and what a reimagined news model could look like, one that's already beginning to emerge. The way these networks approach their audiences is evolving, and for many of them, it's adapt or collapse. Just last month, both CNN and ABC slashed 6% of their workforce in a push towards digital. Traditional media is struggling to connect with a generation that doesn't sit down for a 6:30 p.m. broadcast, that doesn't subscribe to print newspapers, and increasingly doesn't trust mainstream news at all. So how'd we get here? Because this trust problem, it didn't start with TikTok. It actually started long before social media, with the collapse of local journalism. You see, for decades, local television stations and newspapers were the backbone of neutral, community-driven reporting. They covered city councils, school boards, local elections, things that mattered in people's daily lives and were taking place in their backyards. But over the last 30 years, that foundation has crumbled and something dangerous has taken its place. We've traded in in-depth local stories for polarized, nationalized content and 24-hour cable cycles that are designed to inflame instead of inform. But the formula is simple. Outrage drives engagement. And these networks aren't incentivized to be fair and balanced. They're incentivized to make us feel something. And social media runs on that exact same formula. Algorithms aren't pushing forth the most accurate content. They're pushing forth the most engaging content. And this, my friends, is where we lost our shared reality. So with trust in institutions crumbling, where does Gen Z turn? To their tribes. Do you guys remember the show Gossip Girl? Well, in this world, anyone could contribute, democratizing access to, just crucial information like Dan Humphrey still thinks Brooklyn's a personality trait, or Blair Waldorf found yet another way to weaponize the headbands. It was chaotic, and it was petty, and it was wildly addictive. But in a super weird way, the show did predict exactly how Gen Z prefers to get their news. Crowdsourced, instantly delivered to their phones, and with enough drama to keep you scrolling instead of studying. But turning to other people to filter and confirm ideas, that's not new, that's human. People have always gathered in town squares and at family dinners and in community spaces to make sense of the world together. Gen Z just does this digitally. We bounce between platforms like TikTok and Reddit and X and YouTube to compare perspectives, and we place trust in the person rather than the institution. We've developed what Google's research team at Jigsaw calls information sensibility, a socially informed way of determining what's true. So the question, is this factually accurate, then becomes, how's my community responding to this? That's why, after reading a headline, we'll jump straight to the comment section to scan the social temperature. We calibrate, and then we collect just enough information to sound knowledgeable in the group chat and to be a lethal weapon at the Thanksgiving table. But here's the danger in that. If all we're ever doing is crowd-checking our opinions, we risk turning the news into a social performance rather than a tool that we're using to understand the world. And that, my friends, is precisely where professional journalism must find its new purpose. If journalism wants to continue to serve its vital function, it must meet this generation where they are. The future of news should not be about choosing between traditional reporting and these social media conversations. It should be about bringing them together. We need to create a model that prioritizes both accuracy and accessibility, that informs and engages. A new model of news must be built on these three core principles. First, transparency. Gen Z doesn't want to see a perfectly packaged headline. They want to see how the story was built. And a few media outlets are already leading the way. The New York Times uses reporter videos where their journalists are speaking directly to their audiences through short news clips. And the Washington Post, How a Story Came Together series, shows all the behind the scenes of the reporting process. Second, news has got to be interactive. The thing is that we need to create space for this two-way communication, and platforms like ABC News are already sending their correspondents to TikTok, not just to break down stories, but to answer questions. Third, news must be community-driven. NPR is already doing this by soliciting listener questions for their podcasts. We've got to create spaces for collective sense-making. If I were to redo our election night coverage, I wouldn't just have my team fact-checking and reporting. We could have an election night where, yes, we're still broadcasting updates, but we're also responding to what people are actually asking. Where we're explaining what voter turnout means as it happens. Where we're addressing viral misinformation before it spreads, and where we're creating spaces for people to interact with experts, with journalists, and most importantly, with each other. So what does this mean for your media organization or for your newsroom? It means building bridges between traditional journalistic values and new ways of engaging audiences. It means training reporters not just to write headlines, but to participate in discussions about those stories. It means redesigning newsroom workflows to incorporate audience feedback loops. It means embracing a future where journalism listens just as much as it informs. For journalism educators, this means teaching students both rigorous fact-checking and creative ways to engage audiences. And for news consumers, it means supporting outlets that prioritize both transparency and community connection. To understand where we are today, I want you guys all to think back to high school. How did you actually figure out what was happening? It wasn't from your morning announcements. It was from those trusted friends that could really break down what was going on. Now, we might not be gathered outside of our high school lockers anymore, but we're still turning to each other to make sense of what's happening. And in that instinct lies the future for the blueprint of journalism. Because if we can harness that instinct, if we can combine traditional journalistic values with this deeply human need for belonging and participation, that's the future of news. And that's what we need to build together. Thank you.